What's going on, guys? Welcome back. It's Tactical Foul. I'm Kyle Grew. Today, we have another phenomenal guest. He is the, new manager, very recently, manager of Ilkley Town Women's. He's a Master of Science in Sports Coaching from Carnegie Sports Coaching, Leeds Beckett University, and he's also the host of Sports Coaching Podcast, amongst other various things. You can find him all over the place. And I'm very pleased to have him. Please welcome Sam Homlshaw.
Hi Kyle, thanks for having me. I just sat here thinking the amazingness of technology that you're in the States and I'm over here in England and
Right.
we're sat having a conversation. I mean, fantastic, isn't it?
It is great. I mean, it's one of the things, we've talked about it here with other people, and it's just like I still every time I have these conversations, right? I think about how amazing it is. Like how wild. Like who would have thought, like never in my wildest dreams, like could we have had this conversation? And I think we're around the same age, and so like we grew up with technology, right? But not to the but now as adults, like the amazements that it's come to, it's crazy. And so now we're here, and yeah, it's great. It's absolutely phenomenal, and and I'm glad that you're sitting across from me right now, virtually, of course. But no, I'm really excited to chat with you for sure.
Yeah, I'm really honoured to be asked. Actually, it's always a pleasure, doing these podcasts and talking about journeys and sharing knowledge and developing. So no, really honoured to be asked. Thank you. Thanks for having me, and thanks for the introduction as well. I thought it was really good.
I try my best for sure. So I think what I like to do, especially with people that I've never talked to ever in my life, right? I would like to try to like start from the beginning with you, right? Like obviously you're very deep into the game, and we're gonna talk about, we kind of talked a little bit off air about like where we differ, right? Like you come much more from like the academic side of it, which I think is really cool, and it's a very unique thing, at least to me. Maybe not others. People are probably more academic than me, and I'm just the dumb guy over here. But that's okay. It's interesting me, so that's why we talk about it. But I do want to talk about where it comes from, like before the obviously the academics and all those things. What was your upbringing through the game? Where did it really start? Especially the coaching aspect of that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's quite a unique journey, really, and I would suppose, or sorry, Matt, I would guess that probably quite different to a lot of coaches in the game. I mean, I didn't actually start playing football or taking an avid interest really to maybe when I was about 11 years old.
Oh wow.
My sort of upbringing as an athlete was actually in swimming. So I was one of these kids that, we call it, in academics, we call it early specialization. So I was, training 5, 6 times a week from the age of 5 till about 11, 12, 13 years of age, which, yeah, was, quite a manic childhood, should we say, always training, always, either in school or going to the swimming pool and practicing and training there. But yeah, I mean, the interest kind of built really from the fact that I have 3 younger brothers. So my dad decided for the brother just younger than me, Jacob, he must have been 11 or 12, I think it was. And he decided to set up a junior football team,
Oh.
which basically come from the fact that he was observing coaching when he probably felt that maybe, maybe I could do a little bit better. So he
Yeah.
decided to set up his own grassroots junior football team, as we call it over here in England. Uh, and that's really for me where the sort of interest in football started coming. I started going along and training. I was 2 years older than all those boys, but started training, learning, developing, and that's really where the interest in football came from. Which I remember getting to 14 and again very late, but decided that I wanted to actually join a team at that age. Which for everyone in England, obviously the majority of lads are involved in football from 5 years old to
Right.
late 50s 60s really. So it was quite different at school. I was probably thought of as a kid that doesn't actually play, and it's a bit strange for him to be playing now. But yeah, sort of got into it there. And yeah, I mean, I guess you could say that's kind of where the coaching aspect come from, because I'd observed a certain level or certain type of football coaching from my dad. which I felt for that particular context was pretty good at the time. Went to this football team and it was just completely different. It was turning up, it was playing a game. There wasn't as much focus on behavior management, and sort of my mindset as a kid coming from this uh, upbringing of swimming and training 6 times a week. Everything was about performance and everything was really serious for me. So if I was going to play a sport, I had to be the best at it. I wanted to give my all every single game, every single training session. So, that environment with my dad kind of met that need, if you like. But going into this one with the team, it just didn't motivate me, because you're turning up, you're seeing all these lads at 14, 15, 16, mucking about, and that's fine. That was obviously the reasons for participation, more of the social aspect. But for me, it was like, well, what's the point? So yeah, I can remember getting to 16, and I think the option came of, do you want to play your last year at junior football, or do you want to do something else? And I just turned around to my dad and said, actually, I'd quite like to get into coaching. So he said, well, pretty young to be doing that, 16. And I said, yeah, but I'd quite like to do it. I think, I'd sort of my mindset. I think I'd rather just be there and help out and learn. So, yeah, sort of took over. I think I was assistant manager or assistant coach. Can't quite remember the role. But it was for my younger brother Ethan's team. It was now my assistant manager at Ilkley, which is quite a funny story. But essentially, it was wow. Such a shocker. I wasn't ready for that. I wasn't ready to be standing up in front of young lads and giving advice on football. And I probably didn't feel I had enough knowledge of the game myself. I'd only at that point played for 4 or 5 years,
Right.
And I can actually remember. I think they must have lost the game, the team, and I think I must have give Ethan some criticism. And he actually turned around to me and he said something like, "Well, what do you know, Sam? You're a swimmer." And at that point, I thought, "Oh, I'm not sure this is for me."
Right.
So yeah, from there, I kind of stepped out, started exploring other things at school that I wanted to do, and then kind of stumbled on it again when I was sort of late 17, probably a month before I was 18. And my youngest brother Joseph, their team had got to, I think it must have been doing the Nines Cup final. So turn up obviously to go and support, and hopefully that he's going to win that cup. And we turn up, and I think it was a manager on his own, and he must have had about 20 kids, and it was carnage, chaos. You've got all these kids running around,
For sure.
like playing like tag and stuff like that, and like the professionalist in me sat there thinking, what on earth's going on? This is a cup final, which is quite funny to think that these were only under 9 lads, but. My mum said, why don't you just go and help him out? And I just, initially I was like, well, I'm not too sure. And then I went, okay, I'll go and help him out. And I think I did a warm-up, ended up staying on the touchline, just, dishing out a few instructions, I guess, of what I thought were good coaching at that time. And yeah, absolutely loved it. And I think from that point, it was suddenly for me of, right, this is what I want to do.
Right.
This is actively what I would like to do for my career path. And, at that time wasn't too sure, if there was a career path in it, or, if it's something that was, really something to sort of look towards or work towards. But I just knew in the back of my mind that, I kind of just felt like I'd found what I'd wanted to do, really. So I went back to sixth form or college, as you might call it over there, and turned around to my sort of head of sixth form and said, look, I was doing maths, physics, ICT, which is the computer study at the time, and I said, look, can I change to like a sports, BTEC sport we call it? She sort of turned around and she went, why? You're doing all right in these, why do you want to change? And I just went, it's just not what I want to do. And I think that was kind of her saying, you're quite an intelligent person, and the perception of here in England, I don't know if it's the same in America, is that maybe coaches aren't always the most intelligent. So that was her, I think, saying that, and I just said, no, I'm going to go for it. And so made that decision, but quite a big decision. Did 2 years, just studying sport. Wasn't too much around coaching. Was more about nutrition and healthy well-being and all that sort of stuff. Probably training people towards a PE teacher. But in the back of my mind, it was always, I want to be a manager, and I don't want to be a manager like with kids. I don't want to work as an academy coach in football clubs. I want to be a first team manager, and for me, it was like, well, how am I going to do that? Because I've not played, or I'm not playing professionally. I'm not good enough to play semi-pro. maybe I'm good enough for the amateur level at open age. So how am I going to gain the capital, should we say? That's what
Yeah.
we call it over here. Capital for someone to go, well, this kid's, good enough to manage a first team, or he's got enough knowledge in this area. And for me, I kind of stumbled across university and degrees in sports coaching, and had a couple, and went up to Leeds Beckett, which is about an hour up from Sheffield, and they delivered an open day, and I was absolutely blown away. And I thought, well, this is fantastic, because sort of going back to the first time I stepped in, I was very conscious that I don't think I ever had enough knowledge of the game, because I'd not played for years since I was 5, like maybe everyone else had, and that was always a big worry for me of how am I going to actually gain some more knowledge. So I kind of just thought, well, I'll go to university. I'm hoping that's going to sort of give me something different to maybe what all the other coaches over in here, the youngsters I'll be competing with, to potentially get a job. And that kind of led to that decision, really. And then, yeah, I had 3 fantastic years up there. Finished the degree, got a first, which I was ecstatic about. And then it was kind of, well, I've learned a lot, but sort of going back to that inherent goal of trying to get somewhere in the game, I thought, well, maybe I just need to learn a bit more and develop more. So then I decided to, make the jump into a master's degree, which, I'm sort of coming to the end of that now, a couple of months left. But that has just given me, a massive amount of knowledge, not just in football, but also in, in sports coaching, which I never would have had, had I not taken that master's degree, which, I suppose to the listeners is quite surprising, because I think a lot of listeners think, or sorry, a lot of people for coaching think that you have to sort of play the game to have a big, deep knowledge in the sport. But actually, from doing a master's degree and, learning how to sort of really take a deep dive into football, and creating a mental model and a game model, and really understanding the sport in its simplest form, has now just given me a ridiculous knowledge base that I certainly wouldn't have had before. So yeah, and then I suppose that's kind of took me to where I am today now with Ilkley. A couple of clubs I've missed off on opportunities there that I won't go into, because I'm a bit conscious. I'm going on a bit, Kyle.
No, you're good. You're good.
But
go ahead.
yeah, kind of where I am today.
Yeah. No, and I think to touch on a couple things there, obviously, like the first thing, like kind of at the end there, like I think it's interesting because like you said, the perception, right, is that to be a coach, especially a coach higher up, right? Like not just like, of course, I think anybody can go coach a grassroots team and stuff. You saw that, right? Like, right? But like there are, and I think this pertains to not just coaching, not just football, not just anything, it's just kind of everything. Is like there are different avenues to get to certain goals, and it's just about like how you approach it and coming at it from a different way. And especially if you don't have the experience, like you said, like you have to find a way that sets you apart, like, because that's what it's about. And that's what it's not just coaching, but like with football, with anything, like something that sets you apart. Like me, like I played for, I started a little bit late. I started at 7, which is still pretty late. Like, I mean, my friends started when they were 4 years old, things like that. And then I ended up playing in college, but I hurt my knee, and then I never went back and played college. And so it's like I'm coaching with people. There's other people that have different experiences as well, like less so. But like I'm coaching with people that played 4 years of college, did semi-professional, had professional opportunities. Like they have different experiences than me, but they also may not have the same. They also have different. I've gone through more adversity than them maybe in certain aspects and stuff. So I think it's there's so many different ways to do this, and so many ways to be a coach and be a manager and all these things. So I think that's the kind of the beauty of it, is like if you can find how you fit in and like what your role is and how you're going to improve your teams and different things like that, that's really all that matters. And so whatever the education is, whether it's practical or academic, it doesn't really matter as long as you put in the same type of effort. So I think it's really cool. So the one thing that I do want to touch on, because we kind of talked about it, is your family. I think something I've noticed is with your coaching and all this stuff, it's kind of a family affair. Even like the Homlshaw Academy, right? I think some touch like you see the three figures in there because it's not just you.
Yeah.
I think your dad and your brother as well. What has that meant, kind of being able to go through this journey and then also have your family right there with you? Obviously, we always have our
Yeah.
family to support us, but you are like in it with your family.
Yeah. 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 I mean, I think absolutely what you just said there. What's been fantastic. I think my dad, wasn't didn't grow up as a coach. Never been paid as a coach, but his uh, sort of working life for about 20 years was being a manager of a sales company.
Yep.
So he obviously had a lot of experience in managing people and working with people that
Sure.
has transferred into coaching. So that's always really benefited me because even this year, really walking into open age football, managing a first team, in many respects you're learning on the job with things like man management and understanding how to work with people. So you talk about support networks in coaching, and what people have often said to me is you've got to sort of build up your network for people to talk to and discuss and gain advice. Well,
Yeah.
I've been really lucky, really, because I've always really had that with my dad, and
Yeah.
whether that's this year, whether that's been whilst at uni, bits of coaching here and there, and asking for advice. And it's not always been advice. Sometimes it's been me sort of sharing what I've learned, which is obviously a bit different to what they would teach on the FA coaching courses
Of
that
course.
my dad's been through. So yeah, I mean, we've always kind of learnt off each other. And then Ethan as well. What's sort of remarkable about his journey was, I mean, when I was 18, I took over a team called Drake House Dragons, which was the club my dad set up,
Yep.
and that was for my youngest brother Joe. And so my dad was my assistant manager, and then Ethan was like the assistant coach, and he was only 15 years old at the time. And I just sort of knew then that this is absolutely fantastic. I've got someone as my assistant manager who's my dad, but he's basically letting me run it, and he's just there as a support network.
Yep.
He's just there if you've got an angry parent come up for whatever reason, and just help deal with that. And then I've got my younger brother Ethan, who again 14, 15 at the time, but his journey was different. He'd played from about 5 years old, so he obviously had a lot of understanding even then, to help teach those kids. And it's the same now. I mean, that's sort of the underpinning of the Homshaw Academy. We work very well together, which is I don't know if how it is for other families. You see a couple of coaches that might have a brother or a sister as an assistant, but I don't see it too often. But
Yeah.
what I will say is no one backs you like your dad, or no one backs you like your brother. And what they will also do is they will also give you an honest opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas sometimes when you've got an assistant coach who kind of don't want to disrespect you because you give him a chance as the gaffer, they won't be honest with you. And you need that honesty sometimes. Sometimes it's hard to hear, but you do need that, to constantly improve and self-reflect and become a better coach at the job you're doing at that time. So yeah, I mean, it's been fantastic, and it's really good, with me and Ethan now, because he's also at Leeds Beckett. He's doing the undergraduate sports coaching course, so he's obviously got more of an insight into these academic ideas that I've been trying to sort of teach my dad, as well as teaching other coaches I've worked with. And it just links really well together. It links really well together. We've obviously got a really good relationship with each other. I think we're very respectful of sort of each other's background. So there's a respect that me being the masters guru, if you like, I've got some knowledge here. Ethan, he's a fantastic coach in his own right. Still only 19, but he's got a ridiculously good understanding from the technical side of the game. And then you've got my dad Simon, who like I said, coming from that managerial experience, he really understands how people work and the motivational side, which underpins the Homshaw Academy, what we're trying to achieve there. But us working together at Ilkley as well, it's just a fantastic support network. Sometimes as a coach, and I felt it so many times on my own, it's quite a lonely job. You don't always have someone there to confide in or talk to, or what do you think about this, what do you think about that. Sometimes you'll have an assistant coach that wants your role, and they might try and undermine you. I've certainly had that in the past. So for me to be sort of working with them, just coaching now, but also have them there at home, it's fantastic. And I think it's definitely from coaching together and sort of working together, it's just improved the family relationship at home as well. So really positive. I'm really lucky that I have that, because I know, it's a very unique thing in some senses, like you say, to have a family that, I mean, obviously there's more of us, but the three of us that are coaches, and we're very passionate about coaching. Some of us do it for paid. My dad certainly doesn't, but he's very passionate and loves learning more and more about the game. So yeah, I mean, it's certainly helped me get to where I wanted to today. My dad's given me a lot of advice, and put a lot of faith, and give me the belief to set up a podcast. And maybe I wasn't too sure how that would be received, or
Right.
to go and take the plunge and manage an open age women's football team. Without that support network, I'm not sure I might have not gone for that. So yeah, I suppose to answer the question, it's been really beneficial for me, and it's certainly something that I'm very grateful for.
And kind of to go off what you're saying, like your brother, kind of the academic side of it, right? Um, kind of go through that, like, because obviously I think you've referred to it as like an academic coach, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And I think we kind of touch on it a little bit. Like, I think there's, when you really look at it, there's probably the practical coach, the one that's kind of been through the experience and uses that.
yeah,
And then you have yourself, which is an academic coach. Um, where, I guess, how would you describe that for just those that are kind of new to that term?
yeah. I think it's all about a sort of different view on coaching, and I think sometimes people might sort of read that, the academic coach, and think, oh, he's really arrogant. He thinks he's cleverer than everyone because he's studying the masters, and it's not the case, because there'll be coaches that are ex-pros, there'll be coaches that haven't gone down the uni route and have a wealth of experience and knowledge
For
that they
sure.
sort of bring to the table. For me, it's all about, and I don't know if it's the same in the States, but in England, I've always found that there is a certain perception of what coaching is. That perception is, when you're stood on the touchline, or if you're doing a training session, that you have to be talking to the players all the time. You have to be doing things with your arms and look like you're giving a lot of instruction,
Yeah.
and praising all the time and motivating. And if you're not doing that, then you are not perceived to be coaching.
Right.
And that's something that, not so much on the undergraduate, but when you get to a master's, you kind of, go a bit deeper into certain concepts, and then you kind of start to begin to have or develop philosophies and beliefs, and actually become quite opinionated on beliefs. And, what I kind of found working in certain, companies or contexts with, coaches, just same level as me or above me in the stakeholder, if you like, what I always found was they sort of judged good coaching to be that. So,
Yeah.
the session would be a good session if you were always providing loads of instruction, providing loads of feedback, stop starting all the time, asking loads of questions. Whereas, and I'm not saying that's not bad coaching, because it's very context dependent. For the first team, if the goal is to win 3 points, then the players probably will need that, because they will need that information from you.
Right.
But when you're coaching an under fives or an under sevens, under eights, under nines, under tens, actually, if you're giving all that feedback, really, one, in my opinion, you're constraining the player, because you're not letting them to go and kind of express themselves or be creative. But the big thing for me that I actually learned in my first year of study was, there's an idea, I think it's Chris Janel, the author is, a paper in 1997 it was produced, and it talks about feedback, and it says, feedback's great, but if you give feedback all the time, and you're always using feedback in the session, the problem is that the player then becomes dependent on that. So as soon as you take that feedback away, the player is suddenly like, well, what do I do? And they look at you as the coach, and that then kind of contradicts, if you like, this common perception of coaching.
Right.
So when I've then sort of took that on board and began to understand why, obviously gone a bit deeper in that, in terms of the effect on decision making and that sort of area of study, then when I'm being asked to coach like that, I find that really difficult, because I have an understanding that, no, obviously these guys don't, and I'm not knocking them for that, but I have an understanding why that might not be beneficial. And again, context dependent. I'm not saying that
Yeah.
that's bad coaching at all. But I think the academic coach, or the term I've kind of, excuse me, created there, is what I'm kind of saying from that term is, we've probably got this area of research where it researches into things like feedback, or it researches into things like the use of questioning, or the type of practice you're delivering, or the learning design, or the sort of tactics you're asking the player to do. They're ready to perform that tactic when you've taken that from a first team level. And from sort of my experiences, and again, I should make it clear that it is from my experiences, and I'm not saying if you've not gone to uni, you're not like that, but the coaches that I've met haven't always had that knowledge.
Yep.
And in my opinion, that's directly from coaching qualifications over here in England. And of course, they don't have time to go over that, because that's like, UEFA B, UEFA A level stuff.
Of course.
But I suppose, yeah, to answer the question, that's kind of where that comes from. For me, the academic coach is just knowledge into, more of an understanding of the participant, or of the sport, or of the pedagogy. So how are you going about your coaching, and why are you doing that? Whereas, I know a lot of coaches that haven't been on that route, and when we've kind of discussed this thing, it's been new things to them. Because, but again, it's the academia side that, I think over here in England, and again, I don't know about the States, but I've always felt, just from where I've been, and the sort of context I've worked at, there's a massive gap between that. And I think, I know the FA now, for example, are certainly sort of bringing more of that academic stuff in to try and just, help coaches. Because at the end of the day, when you start as a coach, the main things you're taught are how to behaviour manage and how to keep kids interested. And then you're expected to go in and basically deliver first class sessions. But there's not enough, in my opinion, understanding on them initial courses are just things like what your actions can do. Sometimes an action you give as a coach, can actually be really constraining for that player, and it might actually limit their development later on in life. So, yeah, I suppose to summarise, that would be the idea of the academic coach.
All right. Yeah. I mean, and I think, again, it goes back to this. Like, I don't think, because I can tell, like, you don't want to, with that, right? Like, I know you're like, you don't want to make it feel like you're saying that you're smarter or anything like that. Yeah. It's not. It's just, again, it goes back to what we talked about earlier, is like, with coaching, there's so many ways to do it, and there's so many different avenues, and like, this is just a new approach coming, and it just comes from this, this more the academia field, rather than, I guess, the pitch. And there's nothing. I would say there's probably, it's not right or wrong. It's just different. And
it's just a different avenue, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think you look at, like, you can see different examples of coach. I mean, like, you look at Sarri, right? Sarri wasn't a player or anything like that. He came up through it, and it was, and so he's different. And then obviously you have the Peps or the Frank Lampards of the world, those that were high-level professionals, and that's where they get all of their experience. And it's like, and maybe Pep's the wrong one just because he's a little bit of a cut above both of those guys. But if you compare Frank and Sarri, right, like, they're kind of similar. Like, they're not any better as managers at this point, probably. But they come from completely different backgrounds, and so I think, it's you have to do, or choose the way that you coach has to be most in line with you. Because the one thing I say is, like, you have to be authentic with your coaching, because as soon as you're not, the players know that. They eat it up, right? And they if you can't get players to buy in, and you won't if you're trying to be something you're not. If you are if you are low block, like, defensive coach, but you're trying to, like, say, we got to be this high pressing super possession team, like, you're probably not going to buy. You're not going to buy into it, and there's no way your players buy into it. Yeah. And so I think it's the same way, right? Like, you can't come at it from this, kind of like super interactive, like, motivational thing. It has to be a little bit more pragmatic in different things with the way you do it. And so I think it's super interesting. With the academics, obviously there's, the uni and that as well, but there is, like, you talked about, like, the UEFA B, the FA, and all those things. What's kind of and obviously you haven't gone the route that way as much, but what is some of the difference? Like, you have obviously, like, a coaching degree, like we were talking about. What is what is that difference, or for you, what was the benefit there opposed to going through the ladder of the FA and all those things?
Yeah, 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 yeah. I mean, sometimes I've been quite critical of coaching courses. Only on the FA level 2 at the minute. But it's quite difficult for me to be critical because if you compare, for example, like a level 1 to, an undergraduate sports coaching degree, well, that's 6 weeks, a couple of lessons a week
Right.
worth of learning, as opposed to 3 years worth of learning. The FA level 2, I believe, is over a year. I think the UEFA B is over the year as well. Um, but yeah, when you sort of think about for me, the big difference is the time of professional development. When you think about if you're studying if you're studying a coaching course, you'll maybe have a couple of, uh, you know, insight visits where you're sat in a classroom and
Right.
you're being taught. You'll observe a couple of sessions, but ultimately, if you think about a level 1, for example, I think there's maybe 2 classroom sessions and 2 practical sessions, and then you're assessed. Now, it might, that's not really enough time to sort of make a good coach, and that's where sometimes I get quite frustrated with parents really who say, well, he's done his level 1 or she's done his level 1. Well, it's not really enough time for them to develop. They're not the finished article, of course.
Right.
Um, but yeah, so I think timing is obviously a big one. In terms of you have 3 years at undergraduate, me now masters 2 extra years. That's 5 years of professional development as well as the personal development that comes with that. If you compare that to the coaching courses, I'm pretty confident there's not as much time of learning or
Yeah, of course.
professional development there. So for me, that's certainly been a benefit there. What I would say is what I often say to a lot of people who sort of ask me about what's better about the university experience. For me, it changes how you sort of perceive knowledge and perceive learning. So what tends to happen in our country is there's a lot of people who and I forget the author, but example of like conceptions of knowledge. So there'll be at this stage, which is a dualist stage, and essentially what happens is it happens at school. You're told that something is either right or wrong, so then you have a conception that this thing is either right or this thing is either wrong. Okay,
Right.
so someone's gone to jail because they've done a bad thing. Your conception of that is he's gone to jail because he's bad. So if you sort of link that to coaching, the sort of perception between a lot of coaches, I find level 1 coaches and level 2, is that there's a right way to coach, there's a wrong way to coach. And that right way might be, for example, a lot of instruction, a lot of feedback.
Yeah.
Wrong way might be sat there not saying anything. And for me, that's a big difference with uni, because I certainly started like that. But when I sort of came to that end of that third year, I got to this conception of knowledge and conception of learning of what we call being a relativist. So that's kind of where you get to a point of, well, knowledge isn't absolute. There's not a right or wrong way to coach. It's not black and white. There's several different theories here, some that might be right, some that might be wrong. Actually, we've also got to bear in mind the context, and this theory might be good for this context, but this theory might not be good for that context. And you begin to sort of come to an assumption of what you think is right and what you think is wrong. So, if I was to give you an example, I was working for a coaching company where the emphasis, what they felt was good coaching, was giving a lot of instruction, giving a lot of feedback, a lot of praise, a lot of encouragement. Not a problem. But my take on that was different, sort of coming from this route. I looked at it and thought, well, they're 8 years old. We're not there to make them play for the first team in 2 weeks' time.
Right.
They've probably got another 8 years of their development, even if they get a chance of playing at first team level. Do you know what? I'm going to stand here and I'm just going to be silent for this whole session, and I'm just going to praise things that I like, bits of creativity. The funny thing was, at the end of that session, I had about 5 or 6 parents come up to me with, my boss at the time. That's not good coaching. That's not what we're paying you for. Well, you sort of analyze that and you think, well, you don't think that's good coaching because you're in that mindset of what's right and what's wrong. Whereas me sort of coming from that mindset, and obviously a bit of additional knowledge that those parents wouldn't have been subjected to or come across. But instead of just sort of conforming to what's right or wrong, I thought about things differently. I've looked at, well, actually, they're 8 years old, you know, let's just not give an instruction, because if I give a lot of feedback here, then actually it might stop them from being creative.
Right.
And and the thing at England at the minute is creating, having creative players. That's the whole trend over here at the minute. So, that was sort of the mindset I'd come from, and I think that's been the massive learning experience I've took from that. And obviously there's a lot of knowledge into understanding the participant in great depth, so understanding where they are physically, psychologically, socially. How do they make decisions in terms of like their brain development at different ages and stages. That's a massive knowledge domain I've took. And in terms of like practice design, so what behaviors are you using, what language are you using. The language you're using might be more appropriate for the first team than this under 5, and that's maybe why they're not understanding
Yeah.
it. Understanding the sport, actually digging really deep into the sport and understanding fundamentally its simplest form. What does it look like, and what are the physical, psychological, social demands, technically and tactically as well, of performers at different ages and stages. Those are things that I, from a knowledge perspective, took on. I didn't take that from the FA level 1 or 2. UEFA B and UEFA A might be different. I don't know. I've not experienced that yet. But the big thing for me, I found, was that outlook of what is knowledge, understanding that there's not a right or a wrong way to do it. Actually, there's loads of other ways to do something, and it might be right or wrong. And ultimately, we've just got to take a chance and see. Going back to the example of, he's gone to prison because he's bad, but you don't know why. And there might be a lot of other information that then comes to surface, and then you might go, as a relativist, oh, actually, he's gone to prison for something, but I'm not too sure he should have gone to prison. Just sort of know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
So that's, for me, that's the biggest thing I've taken out from it, as well as, obviously the knowledge that's come with doing a master's. But I think that's a huge difference. I'm not too sure, and again, I could be entirely wrong, but I'm not too sure the coaching degrees would give you that professional and personal development to how you change as a learner and change your viewpoint on knowledge.
Yeah, I mean, like, so I know, like, the coaching courses over here, I think they're trying to change things, but it has been kind of very, like, pass or fail. And it's like, when you have a pass or fail model, then it goes back to what you're saying. It's like, it's either right or it's wrong. I mean, I know, like, I've talked to so many people, like coaches will tell other coaches, like, all right, I know what you do, it's good, but you can't do that there.
Yeah.
I mean, up until recently, you couldn't do a rondo at a coaching course here because it's not game like, and they didn't like omnidirectional games because it's not the game, and it's like, I use rondos in every single training session because you can work on so many things with them, right? Like, and everywhere else in the world uses them. So I'm like, I feel like you're probably wrong on this one, but but you just do things to kind of get your, just to kind of pass. And so when you have that, when like you're not being authentic. So you're being told you're right for doing something you're never going to do again, or you change, right? So now you're trying to be something you're not, and it's like, is that really the best way of doing it? And so, like, for me, obviously your route is like academics, and like I can learn from that. It's a different avenue. For me, like, I'll take the coaching courses the same way you will, because you need the pieces of paper to get different opportunities, right? It's the same thing as with getting a college degree or anything like that. But for me, it's just always been like, let me get in there, let me be in the sessions, make my mistakes, have my successes, and then talk to other coaches and different things like that. Because like that's for me, that's always been my best way of development, is doing something and then discussing. If I can discuss it with somebody else and like brainstorm and go through it, and that's always been the best way for me. And so like I even recording sessions, recording games, and like those type of things is how I do it. So the coaches courses are, it's tough because I get it, because you have like the federation decides what the country is kind of trying to build towards. So in that aspect, I get it, but at the same time, I think it's contextual, right? Like every single team's different, every single player's different, and so it's like, yes, but yes, I get like we have to build towards something. For me, like I really kind of just like throw it to the side because I'm in the United States. Like, let's be honest, like we haven't built anything for me to like say, all right, yeah, we're building towards that. No, we have done like the women, sure, like yeah, absolutely. But the truth is, like we've talked about it recently, is like developmentally, like we haven't really done anything crazy, and like the women, like developmentally aren't that much further along than the other women. We just have better players, or like than the other countries. We have more top end players. So like that's where we're at, and a lot of that is because we had, and you see it with a lot of things, like we had the top league for women. So what happens is the best competition is in our country, and so you win. The same way, you have the Spains win, you have Germany win. England, obviously, I think their issues lie within, decision making, but you have success there. You have better players coming from there for those reasons because you have the better players there. And that's why our women are doing well. Our men, our league's trash, and we've had too much politics getting in the way of those things. So in my head, I can't like say like, all right, that's the right way, so that's the way I should go, because there's really nothing. There's no evidence. There's no tangible proof that is actually the right way for me. So I can't really buy in. So I agree when it comes to like the coaching courses. Like they're there, and I think they can be helpful. But I also think that they kind of teach this very robotic way of coaching that I just can't buy into.
Yeah.
So with your experiences, obviously we touched on a little bit. You've now had your hand at some first team jobs. And one, obviously Ilkley Town, where you're at now, but before then, I think Old Centralians. Is that how I say that? Did I get that right? Look at me go. I'm the king of saying names wrong. So, with your experiences, what was that like? Would that be kind of your first like full job, the Old Centralians then?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it was. It was a massive step up really, because all I'd ever done up until taking that this summer was, junior youth coaching, and I'd worked with, the youngest being like 18-month little, babies with the parents teaching them how to kick a ball.
Yep.
And the oldest, I think the oldest I had must have been about 18 or 19. So yeah, you're sort of thrown into suddenly being an open age manager, and obviously at the time only being 23, and open age obviously means people older than you.
Right.
I think about that division we're in, the Old Centralians. There were players that were like 50, 55. We had a player who was 56. So it's suddenly a completely different environment, where I always found when you were the oldest, if you like, you were coaching, your players were 15, 16, 17, whatever. You wouldn't always get respect, but you'd gain respect because you were older.
Yep.
And that just kind of comes from, I think, being, like at school, for example. I don't know about the kids today, but when I was a kid, if I was, 11, you'd always respect the 14, 15, 16-year-olds, for example. So, yeah, you're suddenly thrown into this environment, 23. I had Ethan with me who was 19. And suddenly it's, right, you've got to gain the respect of these players. I'm not just going to give it you. You've got to show them who you are. And it was, I remember the first month was massively difficult. I think a bit of an insight for the listeners, the American listeners. Women's football, obviously, over here isn't, the same as it is over in America. It's not as far developed. So what that means is that you'll, particularly at the amateur level, you'll often get players that have never played the game before, and they just fancy coming in and trying it for the first time. Now, obviously, I would presume that might be the same for the men's game over in the States, but but that's sort of something particular amateur football you'll often be presented by. So, forget trying to give them a style of play or a certain philosophy. You firstly got to teach them the rules of the game and how to play the game. So, yeah, we basically had a load of players. We were a new team. A load of players came to us, mixed that hadn't played before and mixed that had, and most of them were, sort of uni students age, so 18 to 22, but there was also like 25, 26, 27 year olds, a couple of 30-year olds, a couple of 35-year olds. So yeah, you're thrown into this environment and it's suddenly, you have to very quickly demonstrate that you know what you're doing, that you're a knowledgeable person in terms of the role you've been given, and you've got to suddenly meet those expectations. And that was a massive shock for me. I can remember, and probably a bit of a detriment of the academic side. I came in and I was, trying to be the academic coach. I was trying to do sessions and not really providing a lot of instruction because I was trying to get them to be creative and learn and think for themselves. The sessions I took an approach of tactical periodization, which is essentially you just work on tactical concepts. You don't work on technical or physical sort of, what traditionally in England, that's what you would do in sessions. I didn't do that. And, it took us quite a while to kind of to gain that respect. And I can remember one lass actually sort of said to me, we first month we all kind of got to a point where we were like, well, actually this kid knows what he's on about now. So, and that respect came in. But yeah, I mean, it was like I say, it was an interesting experience. It was certainly a lot of things to learn from. Understanding how to manage people and manage different people, different characters, was certainly something I'd never really had before. At youth football, of course, you don't have 11 kids that are all the same, but generally they will behave in the same because they come from a school environment where they've had to adhere to certain rules or behave in certain ways. Whereas obviously when you work with adults and they're exposed to different jobs, different lives, some are students, some aren't, that kind of isn't the same. And they're not sort of conditioned in the same way. So yeah, you've got to be aware of that and sort of learn very quickly on the job. But the biggest thing for me was sort of understanding players' expectations. And I can remember we must have got to October and it ended up going into a national lockdown this November in England. And that was like a bit of a reflection session for me. And I think I'd spoke to a couple of the players, and a couple of the players had said, I think the feeling of you, Sam, is that, you're obviously a really intelligent, bloke in terms of you doing a master's, but none of us really know what that means. We think you're a really, nice guy, but we're not, or the general feeling was we're not too sure, if you're, doing the right things at this level, not too sure you've got enough experience. And what they were saying is that I wasn't meeting the expectations of those players. So you think about football over in England, the home of football, traditionally, everyone kind of thinks they know what football is. We're quite an arrogant nation in that respect. And what you generally see at amateur level, and, I would guess at semi-pro as well, is often you'll see managers screaming at players, on the touchline, giving a load of instruction. Half-time team talks, if they're losing 1-0, they will absolutely, kill them, bollock them, give them a massive telling off. That's the traditional coaching approach in open age football over here. And, that's what those players that have played before, that was their expectation of what coaching was. Now, obviously, me sort of coming from that academic side and, maybe having an understanding of why I don't think that's best to do with these players, I did a completely different way of coaching, if you like, that wasn't always screaming on the touchline, giving a load of instruction. It wasn't always absolutely hammering players. I can remember our first game, we played a semi-pro team and we lost 12-0. And I didn't even shout at the players because, put it into context, we've been together 6 weeks. You've actually done all right. The 5 divisions, 6 divisions above you. But all the fans couldn't believe that I'd not gone and absolutely, tailed off these players massively. So they were going home and crying. They couldn't believe it. And what I quickly learnt is that even though in my head I thought I was doing really good coaching and being a really good manager because I was doing it differently and taking in what I'd learned from university and put in, actually the perception of some of the players was it wasn't actually good coaching because it wasn't meeting their expectations. Right. And I suddenly had to learn that. And I can remember in that November period, I'd really reflected spoke to a lot of coaches, and it had really clicked with me. So then when I went back after, towards the end of that lockdown period, and when we were allowed to train and coach again, I had to change, and I had to suddenly be that coach that gives a lot of instruction and give dishes out a few more telling offs than I were giving, which in my mind I thought originally that's not good coaching. But what I learned was those players needed that.
Yep.
Because that was their expectation, and because I wasn't giving them that before, initially there was buying once we'd got that respect, but then that buying kind of dropped because suddenly they were like, well, he's not conforming to our expectations. As soon as we changed and we were a bit more aggressive and giving more instruction, a bit more feedback all the time, sort of telling them what we wanted to do, suddenly that buying went back up. And it's really interesting because sort of me from my background and sort of my knowledge base from the Masters, I thought, going back and doing that in December, I thought that was awful coaching. I hated it. I didn't enjoy it. But, ultimately as the coach, you've got to meet what those players need, and those players needed that from me.
Yeah.
And as soon as I became that coach, we won our first game. And, sort of me in this context now up at Ilkley, which, it's a bigger club. It's a club that, has a men's and women's first team and also has youth structures in place. It's a club with an ambition to go semi-pro for both the men's and women's within the next couple of years. That's really helped me understand. And, and those players at Ilkley might be completely different. They might actually prefer this sort of approach. But
Right.
the biggest lesson I took from open age football was recognising the players' expectations, recognising what they need from you. Some of the players were saying to me, you're asking us to be creative, but, when we're in the game, we don't know how to be creative. We just want to know, do we need to pass? Do we need to tackle? Do we need to head the ball? What do you want us to do? And that was a massive learning curve for me. And again, probably coming from that youth development, phase, if you like, where, my experience was letting them be creative, letting them figure out what to do on the pitch, because I didn't want to constrain the players. But actually at first team level, if you do that, in some contexts, you're not perceived to be very good at what you do. And, like I say, it was a shocker for me, but, very glad I went through that experience because, for 6 months now, I've got that gone into the road with Ilkley. That's a very important thing you need, especially when we talk about buying and creating a culture that you want your players to conform to, whether that's, winning culture, trying to get promoted. You need to have an understanding of why them players are there and what they want from you and what they actually need from you. So, yeah, really interesting learning curve, I would say.
Sure, and I think that word that you use, culture, is massive. I think it's kind of one of the most important things that you have to build, and it's also one of the most like rewarding things I think about coaching is like if you can build this culture, whatever level you're at, right? Like I'm in the youth level. When you're talking about like the young kids, like that's me for the most part, right? Like, and then I also have like a U17 team as well. But like in all the teams are the same. Is like build the culture of the team, build what you want them to be as people within that team, and then also because what that does is it trickles into the game and like what you expect out of them for training, right? Like, like for me, I'm pretty level person for the most part, except for when I'm playing. That's a completely different story. I'm an absolute, I'm a maniac. I'm a hothead there. But like as a coach, and as a person, I'm just not. I don't get mad easily. Like it takes a lot to really do that. And so like for me, I don't love yelling at my players for no reason either. But and so what happens is because I'm pretty nice and I'm pretty like easygoing for the most part. What it does is the team knows because of what I've built with them that like when I'm actually upset and I am like yelling and stuff, they're like, oh wait, he's like he's upset. Like we really messed up. And so like I think that's kind of where you're at is like if you build this thing where like you can build this culture and build this understanding with that group of like, okay, he's not that guy, but when he is that guy, that means we really messed up. So obviously we're wrong. And so if you're able to do that, because like I think you hear like I had to change and things like that, it's it's adapting, right? Like you have to adapt the way that you act around certain people because it's people are snowflakes, right? Like no one's the
Absolutely.
same.
Yeah.
And so like if you try to just be the exact same and like like people will think like Bielsa, right? Like he doesn't change. Well, yeah, he doesn't change the way that his teams play, but I guarantee he interacts with his players differently. Like
Yeah.
there's a difference between, so like every coach you have to. Like if you can't work with different sets of players, and obviously that's different. Maybe he can just get the exact same type of players mentality wise to come through his club because it's professional. But for just about every other level, like you're gonna get all kinds of different people, all kinds of different players that react to different things, and so if you can adapt and like add things, without going away from what you are, then that's how you do that, and it
Yeah.
just creates an understanding. So yeah, I
Absolutely.
think I think that's a really cool thing like that we learn. Like I think you said 20, you're 20 like 23 or so. I'm 20. I'm 25. So like I'm in that boat of like uh, I'm young. I'm still learning how to like fully do those like to be a coach and like also how to. I'm 25. I don't like. I'm learning how to interact with all kinds of different age groups, right? Like those type of things. And so we're learning these things, and yeah, you learn like okay, there's so many differences in people, and so figuring that out is I think one of the hardest things. But it's also if you can kind of master that, is probably for me. It's my opinion, but I think it's if you can master or at least get very good at like handling different people in different situations, that's more important than being the best tactical or technical coach. That's
Yeah.
been my opinion for sure. So,
Yeah.
um, when it comes to coaching, obviously with your different route, with it being very academic, um, is are there? Do you have inspirations within coaching? Obviously, I think your dad and your brothers. I think that's an inspiration in itself with just the family. But like outside of that, is it within the coaching world that you have your inspirations, or is it more on the academic side that you have those inspirations?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's a really good question that, and it's certainly at times kind of switch for me. When I first, for that under nines final, stepped on that touchline, with them 9-year-old kids. That's what I in my head. That's what I want to do.
Yeah.
I want to be a professional football manager. You know, I've got to try and follow it.
Right.
I can't describe the feeling. It just clicked. That's what I wanted to do. But and this is, in my opinion, sometimes a bit of a problem in coaching. But what coaches tend to do is they tend to compare to other coaches,
Yep.
compare to what someone at the same age has done, or someone at university. And when I got to university, I think from probably 18 and 19, those 2 years in sixth form, I wasn't an arrogant person like at the school. Well, in my head, I thought I was probably the best 19-year-old football coach in the world. I was
Yeah.
so confident in my ability. And I thought, yeah, this is easy. I'll be working for Man United's academy in 4 years' time or whatever. And then you get to uni, and actually, there's quite a few people that are, as good as you, actually quite a bit better than you.
Yeah.
And some of them have already worked at a professional football academy, or some are actively working for an academy. And you're like, wow, wow. So, at that point, it was suddenly like, well, and I can remember thinking, oh, maybe I've been a bit too ambitious here. And then I kind of thought, no, I'll just become an academy coach. I think I'll really enjoy that. So that was the focus for, my first year. It was the focus for the second year. And then when I got to third year and sort of the dissertation process, which, if you ask any student, they always go, oh, what a nightmare that was or whatever. I'm the odd one that absolutely loved that process.
It's awesome.
I find sort of researching into concepts so interesting, and I really, really enjoyed the particular research I was doing in that. And at that point, I thought to myself, well, do you know what? I might actually go and do a PhD and become a senior lecturer here because, it's a very stable job, pays well, and I really enjoy
Yeah.
that sort of route. And then was, like I said, from, sort of that third year into the first couple of months of the Masters, in my head it was, I'm a coach, but I want to be a lecturer now, and got to make sure I get top marks in every bit of work I do, and put a lot of pressure on myself there. But then, sort of going into the lockdown period, and just before I suppose we went into lockdown, I think it was about January. I was, doing the Masters, enjoying it, but I was working for a private football academy,
Yep.
which is, if you like, in first and second year, that's what I thought I was going to end up doing.
Yep.
And I hated it. I couldn't stand it, for various reasons. And I can remember sitting down and, 23, and I sat there, I'm not afraid to say I'm going through a bit of depression at the time, felt very depressed. And, I just thought to myself, I've not achieved what I thought I should have achieved at this point of my life. I thought I should be, higher up doing something, probably where I am now. I probably thought I should have been like that a year ago. And, I kind of sat down with my dad again, going back to that support network. And we kind of sat down and we went, well, what do you want to achieve? What do you want to do? And I had this whiteboard and put a load of things down. And, one route was becoming a senior lecturer and going down the academic. The other was, well, actually, I think I do really want to pursue that dream now of getting to the top of the professional game as a manager if I can. And yeah, I mean, I think for about a year, probably just too early this year, it's really been that. And the thing is, as a coach, I think you're quite lucky because, for me, it is, at this current moment in time, I'm involved in quite a few projects. So we've got the Homlshaw Academy, I've got Ilkley Town, I've got the podcast.
Yep.
I'm a master's student. I work as a master's intern at Leeds Beckett, so I'm like a coach educator for second and third years.
Busy.
Very busy, and sort of doing that, I think, well, I can kind of follow too. But what I sort of realised earlier this year is that, you sort of think about, like you said, busy there, the time demands, that I've got to go for one or I've got to go for the other.
Yeah.
Because if I want to do, senior lecturer academic route, I've really got to work hard and I've got to get myself in a position where someone wants to offer me, to study a PhD. But equally, if I want to try and be a professional manager, well, I've got to get my name out there. I've got to do a good job. I've got to sort of demonstrate what I'm doing, and hopefully someone will give me an opportunity. And I can remember having this with a good mate of mine, Josh Smith, who just finished the Masters, and he's a rugby coach, fantastic guy. And we were sort of chatting about it because he was in the same sort of mindset. And he said, the thing is, when I think about the start, I didn't get into coaching to become a lecturer. I got into coaching for X, Y, and Z, and that made me think, yeah, yeah. And I would love being a lecturer. I'd love it. I really would. But it wouldn't sort of fill. There'd still be a desire in me that would think, well, what if I'd have done that? What do you know what I mean? Could I have got there? And the sort of person I am, I'm never happy. So I'm very privileged at the minute to be sort of given the role at Ilkley Town, to be in this academy. But I want more. I want to keep progressing. I want to keep developing. I want Ilkley Town to be a professional women's club. That's just how I am. And I sort of felt that burning desire in me when I was 17, thinking, this is what I want to do. If I was a lecturer, I don't think that would sort of meet what I was, you know what I mean? I'd feel a bit empty inside.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So, yeah, so kind of, very recently, I should say, and, certainly since I've, got in at Ilkley Town now, which is, just everything I've always kind of wanted really at this current moment. It's a fantastic club to be involved in. It's so exciting. It very much for me now is sort of, let's go for it. Let's try and get there. And if you don't, there'll always be that academic route as well, because it's never too late to study a PhD. It's never too late to become a lecturer. So, yeah, pursuing the dream, and I guess we'll see where it goes in the next 10 years or so.
Absolutely. And before we have a little section at the end that I do with other people, but before that, I do want to talk for sure a little bit about, obviously you have a lot of things else going on outside of on the pitch. We've talked about the podcast and different things like that. You have your website, Homlshaw Academy, all those things where, the podcast is not just football. You have other, from I think all sports, it seems like, from what I've seen, and, different things like that. But obviously when it comes to everything else that you're doing within the website, There's a lot of content, a lot of, game and practice model
Yeah,
things,
yeah.
blogs and certain things like that. Um, is that kind of, do you think that that will give you that fill of like the lecturing, which is something you would like to do, right? But like you get to give that information and like provide this education from your perspective while also being the coach and not having to go full time as a lecturer.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, and there's this, I have a bit of a chip on my shoulder really because
I got you there.
yeah. But like I said, the perception in this country is that coaching is, you plan a session and you scribble a couple of drills down, you go and deliver it. It's all about behavior management. As long as kids are having a good time, it's all right, and you come home and that's everyone's perception of what coaching is. And a lot of people would say you don't have to be very intelligent to do it, and it really, really annoys me when people have that perception, and it's perception over here in England. I don't know if it's the same over in the States. So, you know, that's a big thing for me, sort of churning this information out, if you like. One, to help coaches,
Yep.
Because obviously, like you said, I really do enjoy that, and it's fantastic. I've had loads of Zoom calls with coaches just asking, just for a bit of advice, and it's fantastic to know that you've just helped someone in a certain way. And,
Yeah,
and
for
if you
sure.
think about coaching, that's one of the reasons I got into it, helping people. Uh, but there's also a chip on my shoulder, when I'm writing some of these blogs and I'm trying to be very academic, where I'm kind of going, to the people that think it's not, an intelligent profession, where I'm
Yeah.
trying to go, yeah, you have a look at this and see actually how difficult our role is, and the knowledge we have to do, and how we have to think about our actions, and how we have to actually plan what we say ahead, or plan what we do ahead, and the consequences of that and what that could do. So, there's a bit of an element of that, but for sure, it certainly brings me a lot of joy. I never thought I would, have the knowledge to come on a podcast. And what I like about, or what I like to do in my podcast, is try and have discussions where we can kind of bring a concept. And I never thought I'd be able to do that. I never
Yeah.
thought I'd, write blogs and people would go, oh, that's absolutely brilliant. That's really given me an education, if you like, a brief education on a certain topic. And that's amazing for me. I never thought I'd, one, have enough knowledge to main, and two, be able to write things down. My English teacher, I remember she said to me in year 10, when I was 15, 16, about to do my GCSEs, that I was an awful writer. So, how wrong was she, really? I find that quite funny. Again, now, I have quite a few chips on my shoulders, you can probably tell. But
That's all right.
yeah, I love the education side. I'm, involved with coach education at the minute with Leeds Beckett. I'm keen to really improve the standards of coaching, I think, over here in England. And that's not me saying that the standard's poor at the minute, but we think about, for example, the World Cup in the men's game. For years and years and years and years and years, people always say we don't produce enough players in England, and that's why we've never won this World Cup since '66. And it's an embarrassment because we're the home of football. Well, yeah, but a lot of it was also the coaching. The head of coaching for the FA in 1970 to, what was it, 85. The manual was long ball. How awful is that for development of young players? The ball in the air, 70% of the time, and they just take a touch and shoot. That doesn't develop
Yeah.
players. So there's an element of that, of just trying to improve, coaching, not to be arrogant and sort of say this is the way you should do it and what you're doing is wrong. More so just to kind of offer a different perspective, or a different opinion. But, there's an element of that where, I want us to have the best players in the women's game. I want us to have the best players in the men's game. As an English fan, involved in both sides of the sport. So, if I can help in any way I can with the coaching at youth levels, I certainly will do my utmost to do that. But yeah, I mean, really good question. I don't know if I've answered the question.
No, you're good. You're good.
About 7 answers there.
No, you're good. I had a laugh because you're talking about the long ball, and it's actually funny because playing pickup here, playing games or whatever. One of the jokes is like someone will have the ball like out of the back or whatever, and someone up top or somewhere will just yell England. And what that means is play the ball over the top and run on. And that literally, that it's been a running joke, and like, because we have friends that like they've played, but they also were they played other sports, that was their primary stuff, and like very high level athletes that were just fat, and they're like England, and they would just yell England, and the whole point was just kick it long. So it's hilarious that like, yeah, that it wasn't just a thing there; it was a perception around the world. And yeah, I mean the whole idea that England didn't produce players like is a joke.
Yeah,
it's nonsense. It really it's the same concept that like the United States doesn't have enough players to field a talented enough team to I'm not saying win World Cups, but even then maybe, but like to do better than we've done. It's like, you know how massive our country is, and we're gonna act as if there's a chance we don't have enough players to field a team that can be a top, let's just say 15 team in the world. Nah, not buying it. So, yeah, no, I totally get what you're saying there for sure. I'm having a lot of fun with this conversation, but I don't want to take up too much of your time. And before we get out of here, we have a little section. I like to play little games at the end. The section's called "Is it tactical or is it foul?" I'm not creative at all, as you can tell. I just used the name. I'll give you a topic, or I have about 10, and I'll give you a topic, a person, an event, or something along those lines. You tell me if it's tactical, good, or foul, bad. Right?
Tactical or foul.
Yep. You ready?
Yeah, fantastic. I am.
So I had to bring this name up because I'm thinking academics, and I'm not sure if you know the name. He's pretty famous though. So I put number 1 is Valery Lobanovsky, a top 10 manager all time. And if you're not familiar with who he is, I can kind of give you the rundown of who he is.
Go on, give us a rundown for the listeners.
All right, so sounds like you might be a little familiar with him. So, Ukrainian manager, obviously did wonders, but he's very much known for progressing the Dutch model, but also he's kind of known as the scientist of football because he brought in an actual like physicist to like break down like the percentages of how much players should train and different things like that, and that's kind of how he had his success with keeping players healthy and like maximizing the training and different things like that.
Cool.
That's kind of that's the Cliff Notes version of what he did for sure. So tactical,
100%. Outstanding work.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love his story. I think it's brilliant.
Yeah, he's great for sure. You're from the Sheffield area, correct?
Yeah.
All right. So I had to make sure I put a Sheffield related question in there. I don't know which team you support, but number 2, Chris Wilder staying in the Prem, even if Sheffield goes down.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question because I'm actually a Sheffield Wednesday fan.
See, I had a feeling.
And it's also a better question because a lot of my mates are Sheffield United fans.
Fair enough.
So, 100% foul.
All right. You can't give any props to anything related to Sheffield United. That's fair. I respect that. I do like Chris Wilder as a manager, though. But
I've got massive respect for him. Honestly, I think the job he's done is outstanding, and obviously he's a fellow Sheffielder. But true to your colours, aren't you?
Yeah, you got to be. I like it. About another manager, and just Mikel Arteta as a manager.
That's a really good one. You know what? I tell you what, I'm going to go tactical for that one, and I'm going to tell you why. And I said this to Ethan, when he was going through the bad spell. If he doesn't do well, then there's no hope for people like me or Ethan or coaches that are young and giving them a chance. Maybe when they're not ready, it's such a big role. And he's a young coach. He's so intelligent. Actually, yeah. I don't know if you've ever seen some of the work
for sure.
Pro license. I think it was put on YouTube when he got the job, last year or whatever it was. Very intelligent guy, obviously learning his trade. Making mistakes along the way. Probably kept the first team players in a bit too long, and now put the youngsters through. But yeah, tactical. I really like him. I was really hoping they weren't going to sack him and give him a chance because I think over time, I think he'll be really good. I really like it. So tactical.
I like that a lot. Adama Traore of Wolves, championship level.
No, I'm going to say foul on that one.
Okay.
I like him. I like him. I can understand what you mean. I think you could say there's a reason why Barcelona let him go. But
Yeah, he's not
when he
Barcelona.
when
He's
he,
not a
when he
Barcelona player.
plays well, but when he plays well, you can sort of see that quality of why he was there. Yeah, I'm going to say yeah. I think he's Premier League just. I
That's
think he's
fair.
too good for the Championship. Yeah. So yeah.
I would probably agree. I was trying to think of things that that would make someone think because the stats are not even championship level. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
but I think he just doesn't suit Wolves.
Yeah.
I
Well,
think
that's very much what it's about, isn't it? The system. Yeah. Yeah. It'd be interesting to see how his career develops.
yeah,
Next couple of years, for sure.
yeah, for sure.
Great question.
Talk Sport Radio. I'm just gonna leave it there.
I hate it. I can't stand it. I can't stand it. I'll tell you for why. When you're a coach, so like when I'd go to Sheffield Wednesday games or you sat in pub or whatever, and you hear people like, saying to coaches, oh, he's done this wrong and he's done this right and this and, I could do a better job than him and all that sort of stuff. You sit there and you think, shut up.
No, you
You have
can't.
no idea what you're talking about. You have no idea how difficult that job is. You don't
Right.
know enough about football. Shut up. So for that reason, I don't mind sometimes when they interview the players, but when you listen to some of the fans and stupid ones recently, like we should get rid of Jurgen Klopp because we've lost 7-0 to Aston Villa.
I love that. I love
Come
that.
on. I heard one going on about getting rid of Pep Guardiola after they won the league.
I would have loved that. They should have.
Just because
Absolutely.
he's too attacking and like that. That's not our traditional league. Oh, come on. You've just won the Premier League, man. 2 years in a row. Come on. So, yeah.
I
It's got to
support.
be a foul for
I
me.
support both of those. They should. Liverpool should get rid of Jurgen, and Pep should be out of City. I'm all for it, as I have no bias whatsoever. Clearly, all right, fair enough. More passion in non-league football than in Premier League football.
That's a great one. Oh, that's a really good question. Oh. It's a shame you've not given me a third option. Really.
I know. I can. It's a tough one. So if you
Do you know what? I'm gonna go tactical, and I'll tell you why. I think with the big clubs, you obviously get a lot more supporters now that think about the Premier League top 6 or top 8, for example. You don't get supporters that are all from the local area now because obviously the worldwide fans.
for sure.
But as you think about non-league, I don't know if you've seen the Salford City documentary.
Yep.
Where Gary Neville and Beckham and co have obviously took over, but the passion there, obviously all locals, it's absolutely fantastic to see. And I think about my experiences now in the amateur game of the women's section at both Centralians and Ilkley. There's so much passion for the club.
Yeah.
Every stakeholder of that club, whether it's someone who's just clearing the pitch, looking after the pitch. I forget the correct title for them, so I apologise to anyone listening who holds that role. But just a fan or a coach, the chairman, secretary of these clubs, they all love the club. I think about those a couple of people at Ilkley. Certainly the people I've been lucky enough to meet and work with now. If you cut them open, they'd bleed Ilkley town.
Yeah.
They die for the club, and I absolutely love that. I think it's fantastic. So yeah, for that reason alone. And obviously, me with my first-hand, experience of what I've seen, I'm gonna have to say tactical. But that's a really good question.
No, I think that's fair. I think there are plenty of fans that are just as passionate in the Premier League, but I think overall, every single non-league team, their fan they're part of the team. You don't. Yeah. There is, and because of the stage that they're on, it's purposeful, and it has to be this way. But there's a disconnect between the Premier League teams and their supporters. There's literally nothing. There's no disconnect whatsoever with non-league, right? You're going to the pub with the entire crowd. Yeah. That type of thing. So I think I tend to agree. Yeah. All right. Jose better than Pep.
Really tough one. Really tough one because
I think it's preference.
I really, really admire Jose. And I think, again, sort of going to TalkSport for about 3 years over here, everyone was like, "Oh, he's a defensive coach now, and all he ever does is part the bus and all this nonsense." Come on, look how Spurs play at times. They're unbelievable in attack. So I really love him. I think he's an inspiration to people like me who want to sort of get to the level he's got to. But equally, Pep is he's just he's a magician, isn't he? How he gets his team to play football is incredible. But it's a really tough one. It's a really tough one. I think I'm going to have to say tactical. I'm going to have to agree for the sole purpose that just because I just admire him for the journey he's gone on.
Yeah.
And I couldn't possibly go against him. But I still think he gets labelled a lot that he's the old Jose's gone and all that. No, he's unbelievable. I think if you watch that Spurs documentary, even like his man management with Danny Rose, for example, when he starts kicking off, I think he's incredible, Jose. Don't get enough credit for me in terms of what he does. And, I think he'll do some really good stuff with Spurs. So, yeah, I'll have to back him.
I mean, when we second episode, which is very, very long time ago, let's put it that way, myself and another person that's on here a lot, we did the top 10 managers of all time. And Jose was third for us. Unfortunately, we had a tie at the top. I had my opinion, obviously, and then the other one was Pep. So I think it's very close. So I think it's a really tight one. But yeah, I think that, I mean, Jose, all you have to do is, even more so than Tottenham, just go look at Real Madrid. The guy played 5 attacking players on the field. Yeah, he's...
That did it on Twitter over there, yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's crazy. So... Yeah, no, I agree. I think he's phenomenal. I have a little bit of disdain, obviously, for what he left us with, but he did win some trophies, so I can't hate him too much. But it is he tried to make us a small club. You can't make Manchester United a small club. This is not how this works. So it is what it is. Number 8, Rooney getting the Derby job.
It's a really good one. It's a really good one because I absolutely love Wazza.
Yes.
Far too much criticism he's received over his career. Unbelievable player. The fact that he could play as a number 9 or a number 10 or a midfielder, even played defensive midfielder, didn't he, under Van Gaal at Man United?
He could play anything.
I absolutely love him. So, I must admit it was a shame to see him retire. I was kind of hoping he was going to take it on as a player manager, maybe to the end of the season. But at the same time, I think it's great to sort of see the golden generation, as we call them, your Lampards, your Gerrards, your Wazza now, taking the plunge into management. And I think it kind of just, in many ways, it's quite scary how you've gone from watching them at World Cups to suddenly now they've grown up and they're managers. And I think he will do a great job there. Kind of hoping he doesn't, because Sheffield Wednesday, we're kind of fighting to get out of that. So
yeah,
but it's a tough one. That I'm going to say foul, because I'd like to have seen him do another 2 years.
Fair enough.
I think he's a brilliant player.
No, I think he's, for me, I think people rate him highly, but I think even within being rated highly, I think he's still criminally underrated.
Yeah, massively.
And I think after he retires, people will very much realize, oh wait, why did we slate him all this time?
I think playing with Ronaldo didn't help, because similar. Look at Ronaldo now, but Ronaldo was only bothered about goal scoring. If you listen to Rooney's interviews, he always says, "I wasn't too bothered about scoring goals. I just wanted to play well." And that probably reflected his performances.
And he was the most selfless player that you've ever he sacrificed more than anybody at that was that level. I mean, I think at one point he was, I don't know. I think he was in the top 5 in the world at one point, and there's not when you consider
2008 year he was.
Yeah, and I mean, that's the thing is I love Ronaldo, and I think he's first or second of all time. It just depends on who you pick between him and Messi. That's my opinion. But I don't think he is the player without playing with Rooney for all those years developing together.
Yeah.
And it's and the same thing with Messi with the players he played with, right? It's just how it goes. But that's my opinion. Last one. This one's just kind of it connects us a little bit. Calling football soccer.
Oh, what a great question. Yeah, I mean, what a question. I was actually coaching in New Jersey. Would it be some of the World Cup was on? I missed the World Cup with England, thinking that, I'll go to America because we're not doing anything, and then we get to the last four. But
Yeah.
yeah, I got used to calling it soccer, which if I ever said the word over here, I would probably never be offered a management role again. Yeah, it's a strange one that you call it soccer, but also it kind of isn't, because your football is football, isn't it? And obviously over here we call your football American football.
Right.
So yeah, it's a. I don't dislike the word, but yeah, when I hear it, I just think, oh, but it's not. It's football.
You cringe a little bit. That's fair. So like a little foul.
It's not your national sport, is it? Your national sport is your football. So, as if you're going to put soccer and call that football, you know what I mean? So, yeah, for the fact that I'm an Englishman, and England invented the game and all that history we like to sort of bang on our chest, I'm going to have to say foul. But I don't mind calling it soccer over in America. I have to say.
Fair.
I understand.
You conform when you're here.
Yeah.
To be and just so we're clear, you guys invented football. You guys also invented soccer. Just so we're clear. That is.
I know that as well.
just for all the English guys that are like, so, why would you call it that? Like, don't get me wrong. America does a lot of things. Like, obviously we use feet and inches, which is the only country that does that. And so we do things differently. But we actually did not invent that word.
Oh.
It just came from the association, and it was sock, and so just soccer.
Yeah.
We're not creative.
I can remember American coach I was working with when I was out in the States. He corrected me, and he said, "This winds me up so much. It really, really annoys me that you English think that we've invented it." And I was like, oh, and then I had to go research, and I was like, fair play. So I apologize about it.
I don't care. I just think it's funny. Yeah. I just have to make sure that we get that in. Like, no. You did this to us. We just kept it. That's it. Because we love being different. That's the United States way. We love being different. So.
And you've got to admire that, haven't you, as well? I like that.
Sometimes. Sam, I appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun. I hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as I did, and I hope it's not the last conversation for sure. So before we get out of here, I'm going to give this opportunity to say any last words, plug anything, all the things that you have going on for sure.
No, I mean, I've really, really enjoyed that tonight. Tonight for me, obviously, afternoon for you.
Yeah.
No, I really appreciate the opportunity to come on and obviously, share my journey. I think it's great, obviously having these coaching conversations, the reason I set up my own podcast, and I've certainly learned a lot from yourself today, from us just chatting. Yeah, I mean, the thing I would say, I'm always open for conversations with coaches. You can find me on Twitter at SamHomshaw_MSC, I believe it is. My website is samhomshaw.com with our new domain that I've just recently purchased, so I keep plugging that at the minute. But yeah, any questions on anything that I've sort of shared today, please do get in touch, because I think it's great to hear other coaches' opinion. Obviously, the sport of football is a game of opinions, and I always learn from every conversation. So yeah, anyone wants to get in touch, please do. And Kyle, yeah, just great to meet you. But I'm sure we'll have another conversation again for sure.
Absolutely.
I've really enjoyed the opportunity, and yeah, thank you very much for having me.
Oh, yeah, my pleasure for sure. Make sure you reach out to him. He has a lot of great information. Look on the website. His information will be down below. Whether you're watching this on YouTube, listening to the podcast, it'll be in the description there. Again, I thank you very much for coming on. Until next time, this has been Tactical Foul. I'm Kyle Grew, Sam Homlshaw. We'll see you guys next time. Peace.